Kennedy family prepared to say goodbye to. A striking absence quietly reshaped the narrative surrounding her funeral. Robert F. Kennedy, one of the most recognizable members of the extended family, was not invited. The choice was deliberate, calculated, and rooted in far more than protocol. The granddaughter of President John F. Kennedy died at the age of 35 after a battle with acute myeloid leukemia. Her death on December 30 sent shockwaves through those who followed her work and admired her courage. A writer, mother of two, and thoughtful public voice, had spent her final year navigating illness while speaking honestly about medicine, family, and responsibility. But even in death, her story revealed fractures that had long existed beneath the surface of the Kennedy legacy. According to multiple sources close to the family, Caroline Kennedy and her husband made the decision to exclude Robert F. Kennedy from the funeral invitation list intentionally. This was not an oversight, nor was it a scheduling conflict. It was a protective choice, one driven by grief, exhaustion, and a desire to shield immediate family from unwanted attention at the most vulnerable moment of their lives. Those familiar with the family say Caroline Kennedy was unwavering. Her priority was simple: preserve a space where grief could exist without debate, without headlines, and without the possibility of controversy overshadowing her daughter's final farewell. In that equation, Robert F. Kennedy's presence posed a risk she was unwilling to take. Leaves behind her husband, George Moran, and two young children, the youngest born shortly before her cancer diagnosis in May 2024. From the moment the diagnosis became public, the family inward. Decisions became smaller, circles and access more limited. That instinct intensified after her death. Sources describe Caroline as deeply protective, especially of their. Every detail surrounding the funeral was scrutinized through one lens only. Would it add pain or reduce it? Would it invite questions or allow silence? Would it turn a private loss into a public spectacle? Robert F. Kennedy, by virtue of his role in public life and his history of controversy, represented the opposite of what the family sought. His political positions, media presence, and polarizing reputation made him an unavoidable lightning rod. Even without speaking a word, his attendance alone could have redirected attention away from and toward unresolved public debates. That concern was not hypothetical. Herself had openly criticized Robert F. Kennedy. In an essay published months before her death, writing candidly about her cancer treatment, she addressed the realities of modern medicine and the people who shape its future. In doing so, she directly challenged decisions made by RFK during his tenure as Secretary of Health and Human Services. She wrote about watching medical professionals fight for lives while funding for critical research was cut. She specifically referenced reductions in mRNA vaccine research, technology she noted held promise for treating certain cancers. Her words were measured but unmistakably personal. She was not making a political argument. She was expressing the frustration of a patient whose survival depended on scientific progress. Those words did not fade after publication. They lingered quietly within the family, unspoken but understood. And as the funeral approached, the weight of that tension became impossible to ignore. Inviting Robert F. Kennedy would have risked reopening that conversation at the worst possible time. It could have shifted focus from remembrance to reconciliation, from grief to interpretation. Caroline Kennedy did not want her daughter's funeral to become a moment of silent confrontation or public speculation. Instead, the family chose control over custom. Another source revealed that brother Jack has been struggling intensely since her passing. He has stepped into a support role for George Moran, helping care for children while carrying his own grief. Those who have seen him recently describe a man barely holding himself together, weighed down by responsibility and loss. For him and for the children, the funeral was meant to be a moment of containment, not exposure. The fewer variables, the better. The fewer eyes, the safer it felt. When the JFK Library Foundation announced death, the statement was brief and deeply personal. It avoided titles, avoided legacy, and avoided public commentary. It spoke only of love and loss. The signatories were limited to immediate family members, reinforcing the message that this moment belonged to them alone. Had spent much of her life navigating the burden of the Kennedy name. In her writing, she acknowledged the history of tragedy that shaped her family and the pressure it placed on those who came after. She spoke about trying to be strong for her mother, about fearing that her illness would add yet another wound to a family already marked by loss. That awareness did not disappear in death. If anything, it sharpened the family's resolve to prevent history from repeating itself in a new form. The decision to exclude Robert F. Kennedy was not framed as punishment or rejection. Insiders stress that it was about boundaries. In moments of extreme grief, boundaries become survival tools. And for Caroline Kennedy, maintaining those boundaries meant saying no, even when tradition might suggest otherwise. Some family members reportedly understood the decision immediately. Others found it painful but necessary. No one involved claims it was easy. What remains clear is that this was not a political statement. It was an emotional one. The family was not attempting to make headlines, they were trying to avoid them. They were not seeking conflict, they were trying to escape it. Legacy does not rest on who attended her funeral or which names appeared on an invitation list. It lives in her words, in her courage, and in her unwavering belief that personal experience and public truth should never be separated. At a time when silence would have been easier, she chose honesty. She spoke openly about illness, fear, and responsibility, even when doing so was uncomfortable and emotionally demanding. That willingness to confront reality head-on defined who she was, both as a writer and as a person. In that sense, the family's decision surrounding her funeral reflects something deeply aligned with own values. The service was never intended to settle old tensions, revisit political disagreements, or create symbolic moments for public interpretation. It was meant to do something far simpler and far more meaningful. It was meant to honor a life cut tragically short, to protect the dignity of her memory, and to offer her children a moment of calm amid profound loss. For her family, preserving that peace mattered more than appearances, and that choice stands as a quiet tribute to the way lived her life. By keeping the gathering private and controlled, Caroline Kennedy made it clear that grief would not be shared on anyone else's terms. And in the end, the absence that spoke loudest was not Robert F. Kennedy, but the silence the family fought to preserve. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one made behind closed doors.